And I'm Deborah Donnelly. I'm the executive director here at AWA. I'm always pleased when Lorne sends me anything to read because she's always so fascinating. So thank you, Lorne. I just a couple of housekeeping. If you need to use the washroom, it's just in there. The light's on the outside, so make sure you turn the light on before you go in. We had problems where people go in and then you hear them like punching around. Just one note, we have our annual awards and lecture coming out next Friday on the 15th. And tonight, for everyone here, if you're interested in attending the awards, tickets are at rate price of $20 per person if you pay tonight. So you pay cash or card and register to attend our annual lecture. Yeah, just so you know, cocktails are at 6 and the lecture and awards start at 7. So feel free to register and attend our lecture. I will now introduce one of my staff members who's going to introduce Lorne properly. So please welcome Lindsay Wallace. Thank you.
So first, I wanted to take.
Maybe I should sit down because it looks like one.
First, I wanted to acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the land of Treaty 7. It's the traditional territory of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, the Stoney Dakota Nations, Chiniki, Bearspaw, Goodstoney, and Métis District 5 and 6. We are all treaty people, and we must continue to work towards attaining the spirit of this treaty. As we sit here today, let's undertake a mindful act of reconciliation, working to protect and conserve the lands these people have stewarded for generations. I'm so pleased to introduce Lorne Fitch tonight. The first time I really got to know him was when I did a stint teaching at the University of Lethbridge on nothing but a good word from my father, so maybe questionable. Him and Cheryl opened their home to me 2 nights a week. There's a good indication of the kind and generous human he is, but he's also intelligent and wise. Sorry, not pandering. There's a saying that intelligence is knowing that a tomato is a fruit, but wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. Lorne has cultivated an ample supply of both and shares these gifts generously with others. When I wrote an article about Lorne for the Wildlands Advocate back in 2012, when he was presented with AWA's Wildland Defenders Award, I asked him for some of his favorite quotes. One was from Arthur Koestler. If evolution had a purpose in equipping us with nets, it was surely for us to stick it out. Lorne has been doing this in one way or another throughout his career. During his long tenure with the Fish and Wild Department of the Alberta government, he was adept at poking sharp sticks in eyes as required by speaking his mind on ill-thought-out government plans and working with AWA on land use planning issues. When asked how he dealt with the many punishments meted out from speaking against the government, he replied, "A fair amount of bloody-mindedness helps." However, one of Lorne's legacies wasn't born from conflict, but collaboration. Cows and Fish was conceived as a way to work with landowners and communities to instill in them both the desire to see their landscapes healthy and the motivation to change. It was partly inspired by the writings of Aldo Leopold, one of Lorne's heroes. His copy of the Sand County Almanac is tattered and dog-eared from many readings. Today, Cows and Fish is still running strong, a testament to Lorne's hard work and vision. Retired since 2006, Lorne hasn't, as I joke, been sat watching soap operas on the couch. As an adept communicator, Lorne has a knack for engaging descriptive prose that makes even the most dense topic accessible to readers. And his combination of wit, pessimism, and good humor creates quips that will live long in my memory. His descriptive brilliance allows us to slip right into the scenes he sets. Whether it's the toilet paper that he once described as like John Wayne, rough and tough and won't take crap from no one. Or when my 2-year-old daughter, like a broken record, repeated for many months his sage guidance for the keys to success in adult life: guile and treachery. A regular contributor to the Wildlands Advocate and many publications across the province, I was so excited to hear that someone had finally given him a book deal to collect all that knowledge in one place. Well, I guess that opened the floodgates. Coming hot on the heels of last year's book, Streams of Consequence, now it travels up the creek. I'll leave you with a final quote from the introduction to Streams of Consequence. Biology derives its power not from technology or the wizardry of mathematical models, certainly not the arcane language of science, but through the connections and relationships we build with the natural world and its occupants. Curiosity is a portal to raising concern, blind acceptance, and acquiescence block people from asking the necessary questions. I want to thank you all for being curious today and joining us for what I know will be an insightful and entertaining evening. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Lindsay. After introductions like that, I'm tempted to just stand here and let you look at me in awe for a while. As a kid, I had a favorite trick. It was to do something odd and then say, "Ha, made you look." Well, I haven't actually grown up much, but I've added to that with "ha, made you think." And so if you're curious about what motivates me to write, it's "ha, made you think." And I would say that this audience probably doesn't need the benefit of a lot of ecological education. But some of you might need the words, the concepts, to be able to transfer that to people who aren't so ecologically inclined. And so that's one of the other reasons that I write, is to frame these things in ways that people can find accessible and hopefully repeatable. So if ever I catch you with one of my books and there aren't any passages underlined, I'm going to chide you seriously. Stories open our eyes, and they enable us to see new things, even old things, in a different light. And in so doing, they ask us, are we going to keep burning the furniture, or are we going to treat this world like the only home we have? And that's a theme that I think runs through all of my writing. I think it's what keeps the AWA functioning. It's what keeps conservationists active. And I suspect it's probably the reason that many of you are here. So if you are, great. And if you're not, wait for an hour and we'll see how you feel about it. Writing about the environment and the issues we face can make for a depressing read. I gave a book reading last year in Edmonton, and one of my retired colleagues was there, and he wrote me a letter afterwards, and he congratulated me on writing the book, and he said, if I wasn't depressed before I read this, I certainly was afterwards. And so it's challenging to get people beyond that first paragraph, to get them into the meat of things. It reminds me of an anecdote attributed to Elizabeth Taylor's fifth husband. When asked if he was nervous about the wedding night, he replied, yes, I know what's expected of me, but I don't know how to make it interesting. That too is my challenge with writing about environmental issues. How to get people past the first paragraph, past the concerns, the issues, the impediments to reading any further. Now, I've got a number of readings for you tonight. And the first one, actually, Deborah, you mentioned the gala coming up. And it has a certain prominence in my mind because Christiane asked me to MC at a gala years ago. And at the last minute, just before I'm going to step up to the microphone, she said, and could you do grace? Well, I've taken a lifelong sabbatical from religion. And so when I'm asked to give a blessing or a prayer before an event or a meal, it leaves me grasping for something to say. So maybe some of you have been in a similar predicament. So if so, this one's for you. It's called an ecologist's prayer. As we stumble through today's world, between the immensities of life and the trivialities of living, help us recognize the gifts of this earth. Help us create more understanding than anger, dispense more empathy than derision, and spread more hope than despair, even after the American election. Never let us become so indifferent that we fail to see the wonder in a child's eyes of a bird in flight, or to listen to the wisdom of someone old recalling prior times. I really like that last one, by the way. Never let us forget that our total effort is to help people see this place called Earth as home, steer them to recognize the limits of this place, and to appreciate that each generation owes a debt to the next one. Never let us forget that together we can do these essential tasks. The natural world holds much joy, satisfaction, rewards, and learning. Knowing about, caring for, and acting to protect, restore, and manage the place that sustains us is a fundamental responsibility. We need to begin those conversations about breaking new ground and finding common ground for stewardship. Breaking bread together might be the finest way to have those conversations. When we are about to eat, let us remember it is a gift, and not forget to give thanks to a benevolent earth for the meal. So I've now been adopted into Cheryl's family, and Cheryl's mom often gave the blessing for things like Thanksgiving dinner and Christmas dinner and so forth. And unfortunately, Cheryl's mom passed away a little over a year ago, leaving a bit of a void. And so there was some discussion amongst the family about developing a new grace. And so I sent them this one. And the response I got back was, for crying out loud, Lorne, the food will be cold by the time. I'm going to take you through some different things. Two people tonight have asked me to inspire them with hope. And I asked them if they were worthy of that. I think they are. And so hopefully some of these pieces will fill you with some hope. And the last one may fill you with, well, I'll let you think about what the last one will fulfill in your minds. This one's called Stream of Memory. Every stream starts somewhere, but sorting out that somewhere is sometimes a challenge. The ultimate source is the sky. From origins in clouds, water runs over a bed of shattered geology. The seed that starts the stream of my memory, its origins, is a tiny spring, a seep, a trickle of water hardly noticeable beneath ornately pink-blossomed monkey flowers. More water must be hiding, since a half a kilometer downstream, the channel broadens considerably, as does the depth and flow. Every stream has hidden secret sources of water drawn. Only a portion of the flow is above ground and visible. Rain and snowmelt are intercepted by a matrix of trees, leaves, bark, moss, litter, and soil. Until the matrix is saturated, only a fraction of the moisture immediately reaches the stream. Each stream is an artery carrying water from the source, eventually joining with others to form a major carotid vessel called a river. There is music in the stream, wild, non-conformist, and soothing. The sound is that of entrained air escaping. Rocks are the instruments of stream song when water tumbles over them in shallow ripples. Springtime brings a roar of authority from the stream and runoff, maybe flood. Raucous bird song follows from males boasting of the best nest sites. Summer thunderstorms overpower the sound, but not the annoyance of mosquito hordes. Strong autumn winds cause the aspen leaves to shudder and swirl. In winter, everything goes quiet. If you listen with intent, you might hear the mountains complaining about being ground down by the water that flows in the stream. If you could trace the flow of water in the channel, it would look like a rotating circular staircase or a centrifugal corkscrew. Water tugs at one bank, eroding a bit, then deposits the material downstream on the opposite bank. Then the helix repeats. Stream banks alternately resist and acquiesce. The stream runs through and under forests and into the mouths of fish with ancient origins. Even though the channel is initially narrow enough to step over, tiny trout give chase to a deer hair fly. Even though the fly is bigger than their mouths, they are not dissuaded from trying to engulf it. Lower down the stream, where there is more elbow room, bigger native trout have no trouble believing the fly is both edible and right size. Maybe because they are largely hidden from our view, the lives of stream-dwelling trout are both enigmatic and fascinating. Their environment is constantly shaken, not gently stirred, by natural events. Within the span of a year, trout experience turbulent flood flows that must seem like living in a warring blender sent on grind or liquefy. Then stream flows can largely disappear into the subterranean gravel, leaving just enough water so that the trout dorsal fins wave in the air as they move in search of deeper pools. Winter brings thick ice cover that shrinks the pools where water is deep enough for trout to survive. Young trout burrow into streambed gravels as water depths diminish. On the plus side, when air temperatures plummet below freezing, ice insulates the stream and it continues to flow. There isn't much stability in a trout's life in a tumultuous, unsettled habitat. With a lineage running to millions of years, the trout have performed an ascent into form, shape, and function, a subtle flux of adaptation and survival. Describing trout as tough would be glib understatement. Sometimes the stream banks, the riparian zone, are a tangle of willows, water birch, and red osier dogwood, barely penetrable with body or fly rod. When there is the canopy of old growth spruce, the understory is scant and thick moss cushions footstep. It's as quiet as a cathedral, with a gentle murmur of the stream reminding you this is a place of antiquity. It is a temporary sanctuary, even from a summer downstorm, ground pour. Except, long after the rain has stopped, the shower persists as water droplets coalesce on the needles, grow heavy, and fall. Along with the shading, the natural rebar of bank stability and the frequent addition of terrestrial insects feed the trout. The riparian forest provides another essential bequest to the stream. As trees topple into the stream, they create complexity, variety, and the raw materials for productivity. Trees that fall across the channel become low-head dams. As stream gravels pile up on the upstream side of the trunks, a channel is transformed from a steep slope with fast-moving water to a staircase of plunges and quiet pools. These pools become refuges for trout to escape strong currents. Often a large spruce with a large but shallow root mass will fall and pivot, coming to rest parallel to the flow, lodged against one of the banks. There it will stay, armoring the stream bank from erosion and providing the overhead cover trout use to ambush prey floating by. Smaller bits of wood are set upon by the shredders in the aquatic insect community, mostly in the caddisfly family. These insects are important wood processors, breaking down the raw material, ingesting some of it, and making the embedded energy available to others in the biological food chain. Often the things we rarely see have a key role in the energy flow and the nutrient dynamics that shape the biotic community up to trout, kingfishers, warblers, and mink. The little things these little things do add up to big things. Once I viewed the stream as simply a place to catch trout, I now understand the stream as a diverse, integrated, and layered system of dynamic processes, functions, and outputs. A stream is a place of complexity and reciprocal arrangements, all tuned over time to the range of natural variability. It is less an entity than a pageant of parts seamlessly fitting together. A stream needs its forest, as the forest benefits from the stream. Intact watersheds are the hinge upon which the survival of native trout swing. A trout is the sum of many things, but if you trace the chain backwards, it becomes clear that a stream without trees is often a stream without trout. There are places along this stream where you could imagine yourself in untouched and intact wilderness. But then the illusion is shattered when you step across the threshold into the tattered, scarred, and industrialized section with logging clearcuts, well sites, pipelines, off-highway vehicle trails, and mud holes, plus the stomped and littered random campsites. There, the stream lacks trees and shade, and you can see the sediment collecting on the stream bed. This does not bode well for the prospects of catching a trout or for their survival. My sense of wellness for the trout in the stream is rocked. The stream has a pulse that sometimes can be measured with the tools of science. For the observant, maybe the clairvoyant, the pulse can be felt when the ebb and flow of a stream has been compromised. Streams, forests, and native trout, these are not simple ciphers, easily decoded, enumerated, and labeled. They are the sensations of systems with a pulse and a rhythm, easily disrupted by wheels, chainsaws, and neglect. The stream of my memory isn't one stream, it's dozens, perhaps hundreds, that I have fished, surveyed, inspected, or hiked alongside. Some are bereft of the questionable benefit of name. Each has created a unique memory, sometimes of solitude, sometimes of alarm. They have entertained me, educated me, and humbled me. Many I have not visited in decades, some I return to regularly. All visit me, stirring my senses, haunting my dreams. And now, to turn into something vegetable for a while, in deference to my wife, the botanist, and this is from my first book, but I feel it has some really important messages in it about understanding where we live, understanding those places on a more intimate level, and understanding, maybe as a metaphor, what they mean to us. So this is about a little plant called hair-footed locoweed. Amid the melting snow, a hardy survival of storms and droughts and ice sheets pokes its tentative blossoms towards the prairie sky. Cloaked in a sensible woolly coat, it defies the extremes of its home. At its peak, the plant stands only as tall as your fist. If you're searching the prairie sky for signs of spring, you'll miss it, since its ground-hugging nature requires a discerning and trained eye to locate it. I might add that I was employed as Cheryl's botanical assistant for several summers, springs I might add, looking for this on the Milk River Ridge. I was really looking forward to getting a doubling of my salary from 0 to, what's the double of that? Anyway, it blooms early, sets seeds quickly, and retires to a quiescent existence for the rest of the year. Rodents, ground squirrels, and the hares that the plant is named after, the fuzzy sepals resemble a hare's or rabbit's foot. These other animals may pilfer some of the seeds, and an occasional cow might lop off a bit of the plant top, but the greatest danger comes from us in the forms of cultivation and gravel extraction. It doesn't ask for much, this diminutive plant. A bit of soil amid the gravels of some long forgotten river bottom, now forming the top of the Del Bonita Plateau and the Milk River Ridge in southwestern Alberta. Along the plateau rims and steep ridges, where the soil is thinnest and the gravel most exposed, a place of near constant wind and little competition from other plants, grows hair-footed local weed. Much of the place where it now lives was surrounded but not covered by the ice of continental glaciers in the Pleistocene. Hair-footed local weed may well have watched the receding glaciers as it established a toehold on the new raw land. It may have welcomed the new tourists in a rapidly thawing land: bison, camels, horses, mastodons, mammoths, and saber-toothed cats. First peoples would have traveled, camped, and hunted within sight of the plant. It may have witnessed the carnage as bison were stampeded off the steep ridge lines. Barefooted local weed stood mute as much of the adjacent fescue grassland was plowed up decades before we recognized the merits of intact grasslands and made fescue our provincial grass. The march of introduced plants, a legacy of cultivation, may have registered with hair-footed local weed. But plants don't wonder, don't speculate, and don't pass judgment. They simply endure. The hair-footed local weed has rolled each successive storm, every drought, and the vagaries and inconsistencies of its surroundings into its genetic memory bank. We can't know what a plant feels, and by conventional definition, the hair-footed local weed is not a sentient being. But it makes one wonder when the places it is arranged to live have such expansive, impressive views. The stories that hair-footed local weed could spin if it had a mind and a voice. Of course, it might be reticent to talk to us human youngsters with our short tenure and no experience of surviving over the long haul. Maybe we haven't been around long enough to listen with interest and intent. What would we have in common? The plant contains an alkaloid poisonous to livestock if too much is ingested. Alkaloid poisoning causes livestock to go local, hence the term local weed. As scattered as the plant is, a cow would have to be fatally diligent to do itself in from eating hair-footed local weed. As far as I know, no ode has been written to hair-footed local weed, only a dusty tome on its status for some committee whose members will probably never see the plant. Thankfully, no one will ever gather a bouquet of the bluish purple flowers since they're too small to attract attention. Bumblebees are attracted to the perfume of its blossom, but for the rest of us, that subtle scent is lost to the unremitting wind. No flock of plant aficionados will travel to admire it and reveal to its muted single of spring. There's no evidence that the plant contains a cure for some debilitating disease, although the Blackfoot apparently chewed it to alleviate sore throats. You might think it an unimportant, just another nondescript plant with a strange Latin name. It's the way we treat all the uncharismatic microfauna and flora of no particular interest, ignored, and soon forgotten. Hair-footed local weed plucks no heartstrings, except of those who know the world is made of many parts, all of which have purpose, and none of which are superfluous. Maybe we can grasp, even in some fundamental way, that a hair-footed local weed clinging on the edge of a coulee rim is a metaphor for our own dependence on one lonely orb in outer space. You have time for one more? Yeah. Bears for punishment you are. fire has become a prevailing theme in our lives. The wildfires that have consumed Slave Lake and Fort McMurray and of late Jasper. The fires that we often see west of us. And of course, the smoke that impinges on our lovely summer. So this one is simply entitled Fire. And it's a reminder to me, as Lindsay said, I'm an adherent of the writings of Elder Leopold. And one of the things that I admired about Leopold, one of many things, was his ability to acknowledge that he had made mistakes. You might see that in this piece. The aphorism, fire is a good servant, but a poor master, has multiple interpretations. The one clearest to me happened in the smoke of an escaped fire at a lake in the west country of Alberta. Now, fire in a natural landscape like forests is part of normal ecological processes, a way to renovate the forest to reset the biological clock. My role in this fire may not have been considered part of normal processes. Everyone has the opportunity to light a fire, but once the spark is ignited, things can go dreadfully amiss. My career aspiration was to become a biologist. I had landed a summer position with the Alberta Fish and Wildlife Division, working for Mel Craft in the old Red Deer region. I couldn't get enough of it and volunteered one weekend to check on the status of trout in Gap Lake, southwest of Nordegg. Golden trout, originally from the Sierra Nevada mountains of California, had been stocked in Gap Lake following successful introductions in the Castle watershed. There had been concerns in Gap Lake of winter kill. I was excited to have this task and to perhaps catch golden trout. In the days before off-highway vehicles were endemic and had taken over the forest reserves, this was a walk-in enterprise. I invited a friend to join me on an overnight backpack trip, coupled with some fishing. Although the distance to the lake was relatively short, it did entail hugging the east side of the valley, avoiding most wet meadows and muskeg. I didn't think the hike too onerous, but Tom was of a different opinion. I thought he would have relished the walk. I assumed that as a hockey goalie, he would have been in shape. I was to learn later that playing goalie was mostly sedentary, an athletic pursuit that was followed by beer. Tom was somewhat short and squat. Deadfall that I walked over, he struggled with. We arrived at the lake, me exhilarated, him exhausted. Gap Lake lies in a narrow forested valley. Its origins might have been a rock slide across the valley, coupled with a beaver dam on a small stream that flows north to the North Saskatchewan River. At the north end of the lake was a grassy opening beneath towering pines, a perfect camping spot. We heaved off our heavy packs, Tom collapsed, and I reconnoitered the site. An old campfire ring was surrounded by knee-high grass. No one had camped there for several seasons, and the old grass was thick and dry. Now, don't get ahead of me here. I immediately recognized a hazard. We were going to cook over an open fire, so eliminating the risk of wildfire by burning a ring of the dry grass to create a fire guard seemed reasonable. The operative word was reasonable, maybe not prudent, as circumstances evolved. I lit a match. There wasn't a puff of wind, not even a gentle breeze to blow out the flame. I touched the match to the grass, and it ignited immediately, indicating how dry the thatch was. Now, before God and 3 other responsible witnesses, I can say that from the time I lit that match and touched it to the grass to full ignition, a stiff breeze intervened. That grass yearned to burn. and the flames took off faster than I could imagine, propelled by a wind suddenly from nowhere. I want to make it clear, I am not and have never been a pyromaniac, although my wife swears my eyes glaze over when I'm cutting firewood. As a kid, I was repeatedly warned about playing with matches. My mother cautioned me that if a fire of my origin ever burnt down the barn, that would be the end of the farm. We would be forced to live in a cardboard box and lick discarded gum wrappers for nourishment. She may not have said exactly that, but the gist was clear. As a result, my forays into our woodlot to practice my woodcraft involved the cautious building of small fires to brew a billy can of tea. Not once did a fire ever escape from the circle, and all were dead out in cold before I left the scene. My fire prescription was exceeded in seconds. I grabbed my jacket and started to swat at the flames. Tom quickly revived and joined me. The grass fire thwarted our efforts and grew exponentially. Fire, if you view it dispassionately and from afar, is vibrantly alive. It eats fuel, excretes the waste as ash, and breathes air just as we do, sucking in oxygen and spewing out carbon dioxide. Fire grows, and as it spreads, it creates new fires that spread out and make new fires of their own. The fire spread and ignited one of the lodgepole pines. An 11-meter pine exploded like a Roman candle in front of us. A blast of heat repelled us. Tom, ever the rational observer and master of understatement, commented, "I think this is beyond our control." At least he didn't make light of the situation by saying it was too bad we didn't have marshmallows. This was an amazing fire, but I wouldn't have seen the humor in that. Smoke billowed up like thick cumulus clouds, obscuring the sky and enveloping us. This was not the mildly irritating smoke of a smoldering campfire. A dense pall of viscous, hot, and malevolent atmosphere surrounded us. A placid Sylvan lake scene was transformed in minutes into Dante's Inferno. Not recognizing, perhaps in our dismay, that where there's fire, there's visible smoke, we decided we'd best alert the fire tower on Ram Mountain that the fire was out of control. This was in the golden era of our cell phones, satellite phones, or portable radios. So we began to run back to the truck parked on the Meadows Road to drive up and report the fire to the lookout stationed on Ram Mountain. I thought Tom would have a coronary on the jog out to the road, but he hung in with me, albeit with some difficulty. With a ragged breath, he expressed his opinion that it was unlikely he would be joining me on other outings. By the time we got to the tower on a rough trail somewhat unsuitable for our two-wheel drive vehicle, the lookout had already seen the smoke, identified the probable location, and had called in the cavalry. Ours was a completely redundant trip, as Gap Lake lies immediately below the Ram Mount lookout. Often in the heat of the moment, one fails to piece together the patently obvious. We retraced our steps, ran back to Gap Lake to find a minimum security convict crew supervised by one forest ranger. They'd beaten us to the punch. Tom again collapsed in the ashes of what had been our camp. With introductions barely out of the way, we were nearly bombarded with a load of chemical fire retardant delivered by airplane. The red dust of the control agent sifted over the assembled group, coloring us all with the same hue, including the scorched and blackened meadow. By this time it was evening, and with humidity levels rising, temperatures cooling, and the wind dropping off to nearly calm, the ranger observed the fire was going nowhere. He decided that if the now smoldering fire was put out completely, this would ruin an opportunity for a camp out and overtime. We hunkered down to the night. Hunker is another operative word, one failing to describe our situation. The fire had burned not only away from the lake pushed by the wind, but also back to the lake where we had left our backpacks. Both were immolated, sleeping bags included. As we shivered through the night, ironically without the benefit of a warming fire, Tom reconfirmed his conviction that fighting a forest fire, jogs through the forest, and slowly freezing to death were not on his radar when he agreed to join me. Although we remained lifelong friends until his passing a few years ago, we never rekindled, unintended, such an adventure. In the aftermath of this, I thought my career was over before it really began. My supervisor Mel, brushed the incident aside, even though I'm sure there was pressure from the Forest Service to do otherwise. I know there were lots of snide comments about the fisheries fire. These went up in smoke, literally after a minimum security crew working under the supervision of the Forest Service had a fire escape from brush piles being burned on Mount Baldy across the river from Gap Lake. This blew into a large-scale wildfire that eclipsed my minor event. I did suffer the nickname Torch for a while. Within a few years, the Wildlife Branch initiated a controlled burn on the flanks of Ram Mountain to renovate mountain sheep range, turning forest back into grassland. This included the patch of burnt forest that ran up the mountain from Gap Lake. Wildlife staff remember the Forest Service equivocating over whether or not to light the fire. Conditions for controlled burns are rarely ever completely right for an overcautious group with a history of fighting fires, not lighting them. Over the radio was heard the suggestion the fire boss didn't have the balls to light the fire. He bristled and said, "I'll show you," and the smoke spiraled up over the making of new sheep range. I was back at Gap Lake a few winters later to work on a habitat improvement project. The lake had indeed winter killed, the reason for my initial trip, and it was likely to do so again unless water was deeper. A low-head dam would increase the lake level, but the surrounding perimeter of trees had to be removed, including the blackened pine skeletons resulting from my fire. All evidence was cut, piled, and burned, albeit with an extreme hazard reduction of a thick snow covering. No fire escaped. I realized, in the context of both habitat improvement projects that benefited from my burn, that you can peak too early in your career, be too far ahead of the curve. There is a cost to innovation, even though it's a happy accident. I think our past paranoia about fire and its control has exacerbated the situation we face today. Fire can be a tool, a good servant. Without its judicious use, it can become the master, resulting in larger, more destructive conflagrations. But next time, someone else can light the match. Thank you.
Thank you, Torch, for the wonderful passages. Your work, as always, is insightful, witty, and very humorous, and reaches deep into our soul. So thank you very much. And keep those emails coming. I love every time you send me something to do. I just want to say thank you for being here and doing this, but thank you all for coming and supporting Lorne. And this is your opportunity to buy 2 really exceptional books. I highly recommend it. I'm sure he would be willing to sign.
Yes. Yeah. And I might add, this is a fundraiser for the AWA.
Oh.
So
thank you.
when you buy those books,
thank you.
it will come back to AWA. So buy till it hurts.
So thank you.
I'm happy to answer questions.
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions?
Yes.
Okay, so you've got 2 books on Tuesday, consequence, and now this book with the talking about searching by the paddle and what's the difference between, in a couple of words, why the 2 books? What's the difference in between the 2 books?
I have complex personalities, and they were written by two separate people. There are similarities that run through all of them, and if you read them, well, you will read them, of course. You'll see those similarities, but I think as well you'll see that in Streams of Consequence, it's an exploration of things we don't pay an awful lot of attention to, and Travels Up the Creek is more about some of my experiences in my growth as a biologist. And I might add, I just signed on for book 3, which is entitled Conservation Confidential. The radio's on, but the reception's weak. I think you can grasp what's going to be in that movie. Yeah, thanks for the question, Wendell, and I have a hard time answering that because I didn't set out to write separate books. I write stories and essays as the mood and inclination comes, and then I try to pack them into some network called a book afterwards. Yes.
I appreciated your reading. At one point, I wanted to go into a rainstorm beside a creek and experience some of what you were describing. Our current Environment Minister, Rebecca Schultz, follows closely in the footsteps of Rob Renner. I think he was Stelmach's Environment Minister, who said in 2007, "It is not the job of Alberta Environment to advocate on behalf of the environment."
So what would you expect from a florist? That's what he was.
I had no idea. I wonder if you could give your perspective on the land use framework, if it has any legs, or if it's just Rebecca Schultz following the legalities and ticking off the boxes. What's your thoughts on that?
It's an interesting question, and Carol and I were at the coal forum in Nanton last night.
I was there too.
And if you remember, Dave Fluff, who was an ADM in the Logie era, admonished the crowd to think about sort of the progression of thought among the Alberta politicians. And he said about 1995, Alberta politicians stopped thinking about the public good. And we could argue about what the date was, but I think he's correct in that. And so when people like Renner or others, make those egregious statements, I think it speaks volumes about their inclination and their misunderstanding of what their role as politicians are to act in the public good. And the public good, of course, includes maintaining sustainable environments and landscapes that have the full range of ecological operations and processes. That seems to have gone missing for economic reasons, if not for other ideological reasons, which I don't understand. The land use framework, I think it's absolutely fundamental. If you don't plan, you don't have a good plan. If you don't have a plan that has the input from the public, the people on behalf of which these plans are being written, it's no wonder we have this madness of simply ransacking the warehouse that is the landscape and ending up with liabilities that we end up, or our ancestors will end up paying for. So, one of the admonishments out of the last night, if you remember as well, was to all of us a reminder that the 10-year review of the South Saskatchewan Regional Plan is now up, and the Alberta government is trying to slip it by with this goofy online survey. And I'm a skeptic of all Alberta government surveys because they are oriented to provide the answer they want to hear.
Yeah.
not to accumulate public opinion to help them understand what we as the public, the owners of this resource, want. And so my admonishment to you following Dave Luff's and Bill Trafford's is go online, read what's asked for, or fill out their goofy survey, but write a letter to Rebecca Schultz and tell her you're not satisfied with this goofy survey and you want full public hearings. Because without them, we are not going to embed in the South Saskatchewan Regional Plan, and frankly other plans, things like how do we feel about coal? If that isn't there, that I think gives them a perfect opening to slide through another coal project or multiple coal projects and on and on. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Oh, it's you.
Yeah, so there's two roles we can play, right? The joyful geriatric with Angus curmudgeon.
Are you feeling conflicted too?
And so, you know, what's the right balance? And how do you kind of go between them? Because I know we all do it to some degree, and we try to be effective curmudgeons, you know, but we gotta be joyful otherwise. It's more of a.
Yeah, we have to be joyful for our own souls. But I think we have to be cantankerous, and there's at least one of my still gainfully employed colleagues in this room who I won't point to, who suffers from the draconian instrument of his minister, who thinks he knows more about fish and wildlife management than professional biologists do. And so there's a real role for us cantankerous souls to point out some patently obvious problems and to make it so stated that many in the public cannot fail to miss the mismanagement of at least the fish and wildlife resource, if not the other resources like timber and coal and grazing and so forth. But I think as well, some of us are in that unique position. We don't have performance appraisals anymore, except by our wives. And so we can speak. We should speak. If you don't speak, you're missing a golden opportunity to change the world. Well, there, that's done you enough. Surely someone else has got a question or would like to be angry at me over something.
Just a comment for a very long question was asked earlier about the departments and various things, how things have changed over the years, decades of our careers, and the many departments that Fish and Wildlife got shuffled into and out of, and the name changes, etc. I think one of the most telling was when the Department of Alberta Environmental Protection just became Alberta Environment. And I then would then add to that Alberta Environment without protection, because I think politicians realize that when you have protection in the name Alberta Environment, the public might expect you to actually do something about it. And they therefore remove protection from Alberta Environment.
People like Jim and I would not survive in this government. One of the other things, which I think is, it's a small but telling problem. Try to find staff, their contact information in the Alberta staff directory these days. Just try. Well, just try and find out which department they work for. And so, you know, it speaks to this. If you don't know who to call, well, how are you going to get information? Who are you going to respond to with your concerns if you can't actually find who that person is? And I think it's by design.
And they used to provide email addresses to people when you did find them, but that's not even provided anymore, except Lorne and I know that you just have the person's name and then at gov.ag.ca.
Yeah. Let's not point out that we're that clever. Carol?
Yeah, because further to the land use framework from last week's. And then Dave Love also pointed out that with the land use framework and the regional plans, the whole concept of an eastern slope
Yes.
was let go.
Yeah.
Which he felt was a real omission that the Albertans viewing our watersheds, eastern slope, as a significant landscape because providing us the water we are hoping for, like 80%.
It was a real.
We do as a people visualize it as an entity, and yet the regional framework that's split and eliminated.
It's a homogenization that tends to defy how we look at the landscape. And I might add, just within environment and protected areas, and maybe even in the hunt and fishing branch of forestry and parks, there are 3 regions in Alberta. There used to be multiple regions. I don't even know what the region that we're in is now, but it extends from the Montana border to north of Edmonton, from the BC border over to Saskatchewan. That's one region. How on earth can you manage a piece of land that big with the limited staff that are available? It's nonsensical. Sorry, I'm missing someone over here.
I was just going to say, along with the name changes and wondering, okay, are we protecting the environment or not? I think one of the problems, and you see this in other government departments, federal, these environmental, they've done names change. Well, where's an archivist? And she says too, how do you follow what's happening in the department? So the records of, Alberta environment and protected areas as compared to Alberta environment and parks, Alberta environment and fish and wildlife, they switch every few years, and those records, where do they go? And those archives, where do they go? Who's responsible? Well, it's not my branch or department anymore. The different regions, go from 3 to 12 to 8 and back and forth. Well, somebody trying to track what happened over 10 years, so you end up reinventing everything because you can't find it. Just nobody's responsible for those.
In my tenure as a biologist based in Lethbridge, I went through 4 regional boundary adjustments. And in those days of paper files, we moved the paper files around to the point where I'm sure they were tattered and torn and worn out.
So lots of us who work in the conservation sphere, especially in Alberta, there's often so many things to spread our energy around to. So at the moment, where is most of your energy going, and where would you suggest is a good place to have all the fires?
At my age, a lot of my energy goes to sleep. Well, I mean, between Cheryl and I, certainly the water file, because that has real implications of drying up prairie rivers. And if not drying them up, making them completely unsuitable for ecological health. Obviously, we've got to spend time, I spend time on the coal file. I feel somehow that I did something wrong in a previous life. Karma has come back to deliver me the coal file. And I think we all thought after the joint federal provincial panel hearing on Grassy Mountain that we'd driven a stake through the heart of coal. Well, apparently Brian Jean had other ideas. And so we're back at it again with this goofy coal exploration application and an AER hearing over an exploration application. First time this has ever been done, which certainly smacks of politics if you look at it even slightly obliquely. I think the other one is the unsustainable level of timber harvest in the Eastern Slope. if not in the boreal forest. And the implications for biodiversity because of that. You know, you can start with every native trout species is either threatened or endangered, and caribou are going to wink out. And so this is part and parcel of our madness to extract every stick of timber out of the boreal forest in the eastern slope. And this has real implications as well for us because 80% of our water, at least in Lethbridge, and I assume here in Calgary as well, comes out of the eastern slope. It's a function of water stored because of forest. And the more we cut the forest, the more we decrease its ability to hold and store water later in the season. So, you know, those are some of the big ones. I'm hoping all of you are writing letters on these issues because they will bite us. They will bite us sooner than later. And I think the other one is that we have ministers who are ecological illiterates. And, you know, I can point to the Forest and Parks Minister who waves some sort of a wand around like he's got the last answer on how to manage fish and wildlife populations. And the longer guys like that stay in the business of managing our fish and wildlife, the less likely we'll have fish and wildlife populations that are robust, you know, that are sustainable, and that we are actually looking at beyond the hunting and fishing portions of populations into species at risk. And things will wink out very quickly. So that's just a short list.
One, Lorne, is teaching. You do a lot of with your writing and mentoring, inspiring other people to help with those campaigns, right?
That's what I do in my spare time.
Yeah, and I think that's just as important to,
Sure.
so that people can hear a message that they actually understand.
Sure. I'd actually like to introduce Amy, who is the provincial riparian specialist for cows and fish, who took over my position. And now, after having walked through your position, I could never compete for that position again.
Well, I don't know.
Another, what we talked about a little on this was a lot of the doom and gloom that the government is going on right now, having effects on our the whole Alberta environment. Is there an organization or beside the conservation or something that's going on right now that brings you a smidge of hope that you see that you want us to all go look at and go, they're doing something good, follow that example, keep it going?
Yeah. So I'll start with the organization in whose house we are right now, the Alberta Wilderness Association, and the motivated conservation specialists who work diligently every day on conservation issues. Canadian Parks and Wilderness Society, same sort of output, working somewhat on the same projects and sometimes on additional projects. You know, I would say that equal justice, because we have two avenues available for us to change the world. One is in the court of legal opinion, and that's where equal justice is doing us all a favor. So this is coming near the end of the fiscal year. So you should think carefully about donating to some of these organizations because they're working on your behalf. So the equal justice is working on the court of legal opinion. These other organizations like CPAWS and AWA are working in the court of public opinion. And we have to be working in both of those because sometimes we don't get to the court of legal opinion until we've done a good job in the court of public opinion. And that's why all of your efforts, whether it's professional efforts on the staff here and in CPAWS and others, or you as individual citizens writing your MLAs, despite the fact that you think it's a futile task, it's not. It's not. You know, writing letters to the editor, buttonholing your MPs, all of these are grist for the mill and helping the court of public opinion grow stronger, that you as Albertans want your political, not masters, servants, to act on your behalf. Not on behalf of North Back or West Fraser or Suncor or whoever else. That's where I think the current Alberta government has gone awry. They think that they're servants of economic development. And there's nothing the matter with economic development until you can see that it eats up the rest of the world. And we can see that every day in terms of Alberta. So. Yeah, another happy note.
So the Nose Creek watershed is, the Nose Creek goes all the way to Erie. There's a little group called the Nose Creek Preservation Society.
Yeah.
And I think it passed the city council this week to conserve the Nose Creek. But
And what? See, small victory. Wendell works on Big Hill Creek.
Yeah, the Big Hill Preservation Society, and so there's a lot of them, you've got the Fish Creek Watershed Association, Nose Creek Watershed Association, and those watershed, those watershed groups, those are really good groups, and the overall organization, like the Lord Basin Council, or the Old Man Watershed Council on that, so those are really good organizations too, that you can get involved in, and they do, grassroots projects, building and beaver dam analogs and things like that, or willow staking, and if you want to get your hands, do something with your hands, and writing is perfect, but getting your hands dirty as well can be very satisfying, and you learn a lot.
for sure.
You got the Pembina Institute, you got the Alberta Lakes Management Society. They love having people going out in the wintertime and doing water sampling in lakes in your area. They'll provide you with the education and all the tools and everything else. And so, there's a lot of good organizations that you can get involved in. Some of them are more advocacy, some of them are education, and then some of them are a combination. So
They're all part of the puzzle.
yes.
So remember, bloom we have always with us, a rank and sturdy weed, but joy needs tending. And if you're filled with despair, call Amy up and go build a beaver dam analog. Or plant a willow, or work with a Big Hill Spring fruit. That's the way that you take it from, what am I, one person, how could I have an effect? Well, you can all have an effect. Take it.
I don't know if you can make a comment on it, but the population growth that's now taking place in Alberta is huge, yeah. Like even with the city of Calgary, we've had something like 80,000 people moved in a year, which is a lot for a city of 1.2 million people. And then you had something like 200,000 people moving into Alberta in the last year. And then on top of that, you've got Daniel Smith saying that if it was up to her, she'd have to see the population of Alberta doubling again about 10 years. So in the meantime, you've got, the wilderness areas, you feel but it's exploding, almost exploding population growth. So it's a huge pressure on people wanting to do recreation and experience wilderness. So if the government's not going to get involved with it, Alberta environment is limited staff, decreasing staff maybe. Where do you go? Well, that means you're going to have to go and have people like AWA to get really involved. And so that's why I think organizations like AWA and Equijustice are absolutely worth supporting.
Yeah.
That's the way it is.
It's an irony. People are coming to Alberta because it's such an attractive place, and they're turning it into an unattractive place. And so, as part of the answer, we've got to have more unattractive aspects to Alberta to keep people out of here. I think we need. We're not going to change the tone of this government. There may be a hope with another government, and so I think it requires every citizen, but sometimes working through the auspices of the AWA or EPOD or Eco-Justice or Housing Fish or the watershed councils to hold government's feet to the fire. Again, by doing something simple like agitating for public hearings over the South Saskatchewan Regional Plan. We want a good plan. And the only way we're going to get a good plan is if we have public involvement, giving the public who own this the opportunity to guide the government in what the plan should have. Yeah.
That last comment resonates with me. I see the biggest problem with wild places as being loved to death in different ways. From people that climb a hill because they want a selfie with them and the environment, to people that want to bird walk. I got my favorite areas like everybody does. And some of them I go to because I want to be by myself. That's very difficult to do these days because people are discovering things from newspaper articles. Come to this unknown place, an unappreciated place. All of a sudden, it's thousands of people coming there the next 2 years. And it's hard. I still have my places, but it's hard. Yeah. Very, very difficult. And that's not a question, it's just a comment. I think that's going to be a major conservation.
It is. We're running out of space.
Yeah.
On that note, a couple of years ago, I read an ad in the want ads of one of the local papers, and it said 4-wheel drive, lift kit, off-road tires, winch. Get beyond the trails where the water is clean and it's quiet.
There you go.
You know, and we can laugh about it, but that's the syndrome we're under. And so there will come a time, and maybe in some areas, in the wild areas of Alberta, we're past that time, we're going to have to put capacity limits on people, just as U.S. parks do. If we don't, those places will be eaten up by being loved to death. And that's going to be a hard sell in redneck Alberta.
Well, another is to expand the network of places that
Yes.
are available for
Yeah.
people.
There's a lot of unused place spaces in Montana and Saskatchewan. We just take them. Yes.
There was a question about groups to support, and one of them is the group that put on the event last night in Edmonton.
Absolutely.
The Chinook Watershed group.
And the Pacific.
Yeah, the Pitbull group. Out in those rural areas, that's a lot of conservative voters, and I think they have the ear of the government more than I do. Anyway, one fellow who I know, there's probably at least 10 people there from Calgary. And one fellow came up to me and he said that on, I think it's November 17th, I can check the date, it's on my phone. If anybody wants to go to have a little rally in front of the offices of Northback, we're going to do that. I believe it's the 17th, but anyway, if you're interested in speaking up against that coal company, then come see me after.
You just read something, Cam Gardner, who's a counselor for the MD of Ranchlands, spoke. And the MD of Ranchlands is the biggest impediment to Northback's coal operations because the mine will be in MD of Ranchlands within their boundaries. And Cam said that MD that has the immensity of population of 99 people are spending 10% of their municipal budget on legal fees to deal with this coal problem. They need support.
I mean, I was going to talk about that. The land managers in Alberta, or the municipal districts quite often, like you say, this is what Ranchlands. I mean, if you've got 100 people or whatever it is,
99.
Yeah. They don't have the resources, the manpower, the expertise to deal with the engineers, the lawyers, you know, the consultants, that, you know, the coal mines, the gravel mines,
Yes.
you know, line up. And so a huge challenge for us and you know, coming up with eco justice and that, the challenge for us is to understand the legalities of a lot of these situations. We can, you know, when it comes to policy, we can have influence in everything. Then nuts and bolts, you know, where is there going to be a mine there or not? Well, it's up to the municipalities, the first ones that say yes or no.
Yep.
And then after that, then Alberta Emerald says, well, okay, the municipality is saying fine with us, and so they say fine with us.
Completely abrogating numbers.
And then the municipality said, well, you know, we're environment made the decision, not us, and so nobody's taking responsibility.
Yeah.
In the meantime, the consultants and the lawyers for the developers are getting away with what they are, and rank and file citizens putting their statements of concern in that, but they go nowhere because the legalities, the laws are stacked up against them. And so the need, the challenges that we have to find people that are knowledgeable about the legalities and ins and outs of these things, it's a huge challenge.
This is why working with municipalities and the municipal staff provides us, especially if there isn't going to be joint federal provincial hearings, environmental impact assessments, an opportunity to actually have our voices heard.
Yes.
Because if it's only a provincial process, if you're not a bona fide, if you don't have economic reasons for being concerned about this, or if you live next door or don't live next door, you're not part of the process. You don't get to play. Municipal districts do. And so that's our way in. And so, that's why we have to, I think, make municipal districts aware of the opportunities. If they want expertise, it's there.
It's all through consultants, not for their expertise, and who they hire, and what the bent of the people are that are hiring those people.
Yeah.
So Cliff and I did a lot of ESA study, environmentally significant area study, and that's a starting point in a lot of MDs and counties. And then there's a provincial overview done as well. So anybody who has an issue in a county should look there first.
Yeah.
At least it highlights something that they say is important.
Yeah. One of us is worn out. I don't know who it is.
Time to buy.
Time to buy. Yeah. Again, bye, Philip.